Just as everyone has a unique speaking voice, so everyone has a unique writing voice. If you are writing as naturally as possible, your own voice will come through. When I know students personally, I can hear their speaking voices in their papers if they have done their very best. Even if I am alone in my office, I can still hear them as if they were reading their papers to me. I also get to know the writing voices of my online students during a course. You will write enough so that I can tell the difference easily between students and their styles, as well as their levels of ability. Although everyone has a natural voice, everyone's writing voice and skills have to be worked on continually. Even talented professional writers have to work very hard to formulate a clear voice. The objective of a writer is to communicate as clearly as possible in the most engaging way possible. For example, if you do not write grammatically correctly, your chances of communicating clearly with your voice is not very good. So if you're not writing in a consistent point of view, or if you're a really terrible speller, your chances of being able to write effectively also go down. Sometimes students also try to sound smart, and so they are extremely wordy or have a disastrous encounter with a thesaurus, which sometimes makes me laugh. One of the best ways to develop a good writing voice is to do just what you're doing now: study English. Other ways to develop your best writing voice are to learn vocabulary, to write a lot, to read a lot, and to listen carefully when others speak, especially those who speak well. Best way to find your unique voice is simply to be yourself. That is, to be your very best self, using the very best language that you can. Usually, if you can speak an idea out loud clearly, then you can write it down clearly as well. This might just take some practice. There are different writing voices that you can use even when you are being your very best self. A first-person point of view, which uses the pronouns I, me, my, is appropriate for some kinds of essays, such as personal narratives. An academic third-person voice, where not many pronouns are needed, is usually best for a formal essay or a research paper. In this course, you will use an academic formal voice using third person for most of the assignments, including the formal essays and the journal exercises, when you write the rhetoric question answers for your readings in the assignment. The point at which I get students in my classes, they often do not have much experience using third person, and so it is good to differentiate between the writing voices and points of view. You should know, however, that some scientists and scholars write researched essays in the first person. They let their subject matter be center stage and not themselves, but a first-person voice might lend an appropriate personal touch to an otherwise dry subject matter, such as gene splicing or the radioactivity of stars. However, you will not be allowed to use first person for the formal essays in this class, nor for the rhetoric question exercises, so that you can easily write for academic and formal purposes. You will be learning how to do this well. Writing third-person academic prose well is not an easy skill to master, but after a lot of practice, which you will be getting in this course, you will become comfortable with it. After you have gained some control over your writing voice, you should know what is appropriate for different kinds of essays. The most important thing, though, is to write with your own voice, and do not rely just on quoting other people in an essay. In your argumentative research paper that you're doing this semester, you must write in third person. Do not overdo using direct quotations. Direct quotations should be used to support your arguments and not speak for you. 80% of your paper should be your own thoughts based on your own research knowledge of the subject. You may be also using many paraphrases and summaries of information you have read about, and be sure to credit them as well as the direct quotes. Do not use more than 20% quotes in your paper. You need them, but do not overuse them. Using this 80-20 guideline instills a personal presence in your writing that will be interesting to read and will prevent your paper from being stale and dull with just a bunch of facts recited in the paper. Remember that MLA, Modern Language Association standards, require you to credit paraphrases and summaries from your sources, and so they need in-text citations exactly like the direct quotations. One of the most important things to remember when writing a formal research paper is to stay away from using examples from your own life, at least for now. These examples usually are not appropriate unless the assignment calls for it specifically, which is this semester's long paper does not. Personal examples are also usually an indication that you have not fully read and learned the information that you have gathered for your topic. Personal examples can be a cop-out. You will also be called upon, as you are this semester, to thoroughly investigate and be familiar with research sources and materials that will be the basis of your knowledge. As long as you document the information properly, you can have the best of both worlds, writing in your own voice and with your own opinion in third person, plus have plenty of evidence to back it up. Some specific ways that you can avoid having your own voice hijacked in a research paper when you're using third person is to follow these guidelines. Have control over quotations and details by knowing about documentation. Don't use too many quotes. Avoid plagiarism. Always give credit to sources using MLA in-text citations for direct quotes, paraphrases, and summaries. See the MLA guide in your English handbook. Prepare properly. Use all of the steps of the writing process. Avoid nasty cliches, stock phrases, and artificial techniques for writing essays. You may have to forget some of what you have learned in the past to write good college essays. Find your own way of saying everything, even if you end up deciding to use a direct quote or paraphrase. Do not be afraid to use interesting case studies, figurative language, or colorful descriptions, even if you're writing about a serious subject. Address the larger significance of your topic without personal experience. Be a commentator, but don't write a personal narrative when that's not what your assignment is. Use a third-person objective writing voice for formal assignments, but be as specific as possible about everything. Never try to sound smart. This usually just results in being too wordy and confusing. Just be natural and don't force vocabulary. Learning more about grammar and sentence structures also really help you to communicate clearly and naturally. One of the big problems that a lot of students have is switching between points of view by accident. Not only do you need to eliminate first person from a lot of your formal academic writing voice, eliminate the second person you from both first person and third person voices. Never switch back and forth between first person, I, me, my, for example, and second person you, which is a common mistake if you're not aware of it. Second person you should only be used if you are giving instruction to someone, such as how to cook a recipe or the kinds of instructions that I'm giving you here. I am really talking to you, the person who is reading this, and telling you what to do. But most academic essays are not doing that. They don't have the purpose of giving instructions. Some people use you when they really mean themselves and should use I, like sometimes in sports. The commentator will ask a player, so how did you feel when you were on the field? And he says, well, when you get out there and you do this and you do that, but usually he really means I, what he did, and he means when I got out there and I did it. This is what I did. Second person you is not appropriate in circumstances in which you're not directly teaching or giving directions. In 90% or more of your college essays and research papers, it is not appropriate to use second person of you. The following examples contain some typos and other errors because students wrote them, but they are a good example of when the points of views are being mixed. The first example is using you when a third person objective point of view or voice should be used. The first one is wrong. You, as a reader, notices that the heart that the murderer hears is not an actual human heart, but it is his guilty conscience. You notice that his guilt builds up to the point when he explodes. But that mixes in second person when you should really be using straightforward, objective, academic, third person voice. The corrected version gives you an example of how it should be written. The heart that the murderer hears is not an actual human heart, but it is his guilty conscience. His guilt builds up to the point where he explodes. The second example is an example of switching between first person and second person when the writer really means to use I all of the way through. The first one is wrong. I've seen this movie a few times, and every time I do, I feel compelled to go write something. Not only because it gives you the impression that it's something worthwhile to do, it really tells you why it is worthwhile. In the first sentence, this person used I, and then in the second switch to you, and that is really incorrect. It should have been I all the way through. The corrected version says, I have seen this movie a few times, and every time I do, I feel compelled to go write something. Not only because it gives me the impression that it is something worthwhile to do, it really tells me why it is worthwhile. You can see more examples in the full text of this lecture that is included on the website.